What's up, you guys? Ross Sapp, managing editor at FightfulMMA.com. If you missed it, UFC 236 was this weekend. We have Seda Wolf's What the Hell Happened at UFC 236 feature. David Tees did some great coverage of UFC 236. We had just tons of comments over there. If you all are not a part of our live coverage and discussion, be a part of it. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot going on there. James Lynch, of course, interviewing a bunch of people over at FightfulMMA.com. He is here with us today. James, how are you?
I'm awesome, guys. Glad to talk some UFC 236. I missed the card live because I was doing commentary this weekend, and it was good. Good card to catch up on. I avoided pretty much all the spoilers I could, and then watched it on Sunday. It was great.
And we have Showdown Joe Ferraro, who in a matter of hours, days, will be flying over to Japan. Joe.
Yeah, leaving on Thursday, 1:30 local time here in Toronto, a good 11, 12-hour flight over to Japan, then deal with a 14-hour time difference with my home time zone, the Eastern time zone. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a fantastic card. I can't wait for it to go down. But before I say anything, boys, just take a look at the jersey. Take a look at the jersey. All right, Juventus is playing at 3 o'clock Eastern today from 3 to 4:30. Nobody bother me. I'll be extremely stressed.
Well, we're going to talk about Rizin. We're going to talk about UFC 236. We're going to talk about the very little bit I know about UFC St. Petersburg. But as we go on the air, Joseph Boza mentioned Invicta FC Phoenix rising on May 3rd will now crown a new Invicta FC strawweight champion as Jandrioba has signed with the UFC. Invicta keeps on trucking, James. I mean, they're still out there. Not quite the high profile in which they used to be. They are essentially UFC Fight Pass content right now. But what do you think of this?
I think it's good. I like what they're doing because what they're doing essentially is they're promoting fighters that are doing well, that are prospects, and then they're bringing fighters down. Like we've seen Kylan Curran and Jamie Moyle and a bunch of Pearl Gonzalez, probably the best example of someone who's, really taken advantage of her time in Invicta. And I think it's good. I think it makes sense. And I've always said this, like whenever you have fighters that are in the UFC, it's good to utilize their brand as best you can. And a lot of times what'll happen is you'll see fighters go to other promotions, or they'll fight locally and they'll carry that brand with them there. If you're the UFC, take advantage of that. At least they're on Fight Pass. They're with Invicta. There is a good relationship there. Keep it going. I think it's good. And, I like what they're doing. And all things considered, with how much the UFC's gutted Invicta, they're still going along. And I think it's great.
So it's become a running joke that news drops right after our podcast. Last week, there was no better example of this as I hit stop broadcast and James said, "Oh, hey guys, quick before we get off of here, TJ Dillashaw suspended 2 years after he had popped for EPO." Joe, this is one of those I told you so situations for Cody Garbrandt, who honestly made light of himself, who he says, "I've only been beaten by people who have tested positive, even though I fought like a dumbass." But he specifically named EPO a year ago. Did this news surprise you that this was the substance? This is a substance that benefits you regardless of weight division. It's not like a diuretic or anything.
To be honest with you, no, I'm not surprised at all with the news because there was a lot of talk way back in the day with a lot of people saying that TJ was on something. I said, listen, everyone can say what they want until it's proven. You guys all know me, benefit of the doubt, even with the John Jones and all that other stuff. It's always about benefit of the doubt. You need to prove, without a shadow of a doubt that someone is guilty of taking performance enhancing drugs. I know that, Sean, you and I know Luke Berardi very well. He was on the podcast way before we did this one, James, before we transitioned to the three-man team. And, he's adamant that like 75, 80%, if not more, of the fighters are on performance enhancing drugs. He's got that eye. I don't have that eye, guys. I've been, pretty blunt about it. I don't have that steroid eye where I look at someone as guilty and I can see it in them. He's got that ability. He's been around the bodybuilding game for a long time. And he was, he always said there were so many guys, and he mentioned a bunch of names. I don't remember if he mentioned TJ Dillashaw specifically, but in talking to him afterwards, he's like, "I'm not surprised at all. You can just tell." I'm like, "Well, no, I can't tell." But lo and behold, there you go.
James, your thoughts on this situation?
Yeah, I was one of those people who was like, let's wait and see what happens here. Dillashaw hadn't done anything like this before. And even with the, Cody Garbrandt trash talk when they fought, but Yeah, it's just really disappointing. I mean, is there anyone, I think across the board in sports, is there anyone who has a worse 2019 than TJ Dillashaw? I mean, you lose the way you did. You know, you get busted here. I mean, and it's not like he just walked outside his door and stepped on something and he got EPO in his system. It's like he had to actually inject it. Like, there's no way of getting around this. Like, he's a cheat that'll always stay with him for the rest of his career. He's not getting any younger. The 2-year suspension is almost a career killer. I mean, even if he does come back, I think we're not going to see anything close to what we saw before. Clearly not what we saw, you know, in the Henry Cejudo fight. But yeah, just really
not a big market for 35-year-old bantamweights.
Exactly. And I think that, yeah, I think the biggest thing here is that I really like TJ. Like, I liked him. I thought he came across so well on The Ultimate Fighter, taking the high road, not falling into a lot of that trash talk. I think he was a good ambassador, and this all goes down the drain now. Like, I think, you know, and like, as far as him being the best bantamweight and all that all goes away now. Like, this all puts everything into question. And yeah, it's just disappointing. It's just goes to show you how quickly someone can ruin their career.
You know who should be more upset about this than even Cody Garbrandt? John Lineker, whose only 2 losses since 2012 are to guys who have popped for EPO now.
Wow.
That's it. I mean, he's won like, what, 12, 13 fights in a row? He's lost to 2 guys via decision that pop for a substance that helps you go to the scorecard, that helps your stamina, that helps your win. My God, man. If I'm him, I'm just livid. And if Luis Godinho is out there popping for EPO anytime soon, I'm breaking everything in the room. That guy, as I look at it, 12 wins against people who haven't popped for EPO in a row. If I'm him, I'm upset. Of course, if I'm a Sun Sal, I'm also upset. If I'm Garbrandt, I'm upset. Renan Barão, let that shit go. Just let that go.
Well, hold on a second. What do you guys think of, I got to mention this because Aaron Bronstetter, our good friend from TSN, he spoke to Jeff Nowitzki, and he said that he was tested for EPO in those fights and nothing came up. Do you guys buy that? I don't.
I believe that if he had to cheat at this stage of his career, he probably was earlier, especially at the point to where he got elite. It's hard to believe that somebody got elite and then cheated to stay elite.
Although, extremely valid point right there. That's a very valid point.
Now, I mean, there are some situations where I think maybe that's the case. Who knows? But it's hard for me to buy that. Like, okay, Barry Bonds, for instance, he was an elite baseball player, and I believe that he started taking stuff to become more elite. So is that possible? Sure, but man, whoo. Conor McGregor can read him, can he? Snake in the grass.
Yeah, well, the irony is even Joseph Boza on the live chat, he makes a good point how some of the stuff all came out as soon as he left Team Alpha Male. That's the one thing that a lot of fans don't understand is sometimes, you know, within a camp, everyone keeps their mouth shut. And then when somebody leaves, they technically still keep their mouth shut, but stuff begins to leak, if you know what I'm saying. So I think Conor got smart with that. And Conor isn't one to mince his words nor hold back. Look at all the Ali stuff that he was saying on stage and, you know, with the passports on 7/11 and stuff like that. Or not 7/11, September 11th, 2011. So, yeah, 9/11, excuse me. So, yeah, it's you start cheating, you're eventually going to get caught. That's the way I look at it, man.
And this bantamweight division, let's talk about the future of it, because it looks like it's going to be Cejudo taking on Marlon Moraes. You have a couple of interesting names that are in that division as well, Sterling and Munoz. If you're the UFC, if you're you and I, and other I, but do we discount the losses to TJ Dillashaw? Do we look at Rafael Assunção and his losses to TJ Dillashaw and say, no big deal? I mean, we could for Cody Garbrandt, but he lost to somebody else recently. I guess the only benefit of this situation is that the only person that TJ Dillashaw has beaten since 2017 is Cody Garbrandt, and he's already lost to somebody else. Granted, that person popped at 1.2. But James, how do you look at this? How do you factor in people who have lost to TJ Dillashaw, like a John Lineker, like an Assunção, and that's really it?
Well, remember with Barry Bonds, with the whole steroids thing with him in baseball, it's like put the asterisk there. I think it's the same thing here. Like they're not going to go back and overturn the losses, but yeah, you have to that is something we have to talk about now when we talk about the fighters that TJ Dillashaw has beat. You know, do we know if for sure if he was clean for those fights? We don't know, but it certainly puts it into question with this test. Again, it's not something that he just ingested. It's not like Chad Mendes where he's like, oh, I put cream on me and somehow it helped me out. It's like this is like a legitimate, like he actually like took the time to do this. And yeah, so I mean that all comes into question here. One thing I did want to mention quickly, because you talked about it there, I kind of like what they're doing here with the Chicago card, where they have Cejudo and Moraes fighting for the title, and then you've got this fight between Munoz and Sterling, where it's kind of like a tournament. So I would imagine whoever wins that fight, the winner of that will fight, the title holder. So I think that was good on the UFC to kind of rectify the situation, and more importantly, get this division moving along. I mean, it's been in such a stalemate with Dillashaw going down and Dillashaw rematching Garbrandt. It's nice to see some new blood in there, especially when you've got guys in the wings like Peter Yan and other standouts, Nathaniel Wood, that are just waiting to get their opportunity as well too.
This kind of screwed him, but kind of didn't screw him, because this moves the division forward even more, because you have and we've been on a carousel the last few years, Joe. I mean, literally, we've talked about maybe three or four bantamweights near the top in the 3 years that we've existed as a website, and now we're finally getting some movement. Is there anybody else that you're kind of looking forward to there? I mean, if I'm the UFC, I'm dialing up Kyoji Horiguchi in a year or two, whenever that Rizin contract's up.
Yeah, they'd love to have him back. I know that for sure, but I don't think he's going to be leaving at all. I know he's still living in Florida, training at ATT. He's one of Mike Brown's favorites. But I mean, did any of us mention Dominick Cruz at all?
Does he fight? Does he fight?
I understand that. I understand
he
that.
Said fourth quarter yesterday, but I'll believe that when a Diaz brother comes back too.
But hold on a second, guys. If I may continue with the Dominick Cruz analogy, when we start talking about the greatest bantamweight of all time, does he now escalate his name back up there again? Because if you look at his run at the time, he was considered the best of all time until those crazy injuries. And then TJ came in there, did what he had to do. He defeated him back and forth with Cody Garbrandt. Is Dominick Cruz now still going to be considered, for now, the greatest bantamweight of all time? And yeah, I'd love to see him compete. And there's guys that are calling him out. But, like James said, dude doesn't fight. Or sorry, Sean said, dude doesn't fight. And James would believe it when a Diaz brother fights. So,
and
he's the best. Yeah.
There are some good names emerging too. Ricky Simone is one of them. Nathaniel Wood is one that I know that UFC would love.
Peter Yan
to really step out. Yeah, Peter Yan. And Cody Garbrandt, I would probably throw him in there with a 10 to 15 ranked name and hopefully get him a win. That way he can stay relevant in this division. Well, UFC 236 is very relevant. The main event and co-main event of this show just ruled. Let's go ahead and talk about it. We had Max Holloway moving up to lightweight to take on Dustin Poirier for the interim lightweight title. Of course, there have been like a ton of people who have lost the lightweight title and interim lightweight title without actually losing it in the cage. Tony Ferguson doesn't look like he's ready anytime soon, despite what he says. He could have his legs sawed off at the knee and he's going to tell you that he's ready. Dustin Poirier poured on strong. That the fight literally took place the way that we unfolded it on the preview. Dustin Poirier starts really, really strong. Could have finished Max Holloway. Then Max Holloway pours it on. Then Max Holloway gets a little more aggressive. Then Max Holloway starts the comeback. But Dustin Poirier ends up getting the win. Initially, I had it scored as a draw. I think it was Poirier's fight. Now that I've rewatched it, but an amazing performance for Poirier. And one that does not hurt Max Holloway in the eyes of the fans, James.
Yes and no. It's funny you say that because I agree with you 100%. I think, Holloway can still go back down and reign supreme in the featherweight division. But I saw an entire thread on Sunday, someone calling Max Holloway, get this, overrated. There's always someone out there, but again, this is just great I think this is great for everyone because, Poirier finally gets his long-awaited title. He's a great ambassador for the sport. We're finally going to see him get, hopefully, a shot at Khabib Nurmagomedov. I say hopefully because, the politics of the sport. And with Holloway, he's in a great spot. I mean, if Aldo beats Volkanovski, I don't think you'll see that trilogy. I think you see Frankie Edgar fight Holloway. And then if Volkanovski does win, then you have Volkanovski and Holloway. So I think Holloway's in a pretty good spot, and, you know, he can bounce back here. And again, like, people make it out like, you know, this was like a dominant win. Like, Holloway had his moments, but it just wasn't his night, and he lost to the better fighter.
Joe, your thoughts on this fight in general? This was a blast.
Well, last week you two guys said that Max Holloway, no ifs, ands, or buts, was going to win. And I made it clear that Dustin Poirier was going to win. So a little I told you so there. But in all seriousness, sarcasm aside, what a great fight. Fantastic job by Dustin Poirier. Maybe he just simply has Max Holloway's number. Maybe that's the situation right there. I think the detriment, if there's any detriment whatsoever to Max Holloway, and he sure as hell is not overrated because he is freaking awesome, is that, you know, he didn't beat the top guy in the division, who is Khabib Nurmagomedov, but he did beat a guy who's at the upper echelon, meaning he can compete with anybody at 155 pounds, in my opinion. He's going to be perfectly fine at 145 pounds. Let's not forget he's young. He has plenty of time to eventually move up, but he's in his prime right now. I'm with James. I can't see that trilogy fight happening at all with Jose Aldo, no matter what happens at 145 pounds. And Dustin Poirier awaiting, Nurmagomedov. James, I think that fight will actually happen, despite the different politics, I think, that are going to be made public nonstop leading up to that fight there. I just think Dustin will get that chance because, you know, it's not a money fight for Nurmagomedov like a Conor McGregor rematch is, but it's a damn good fight. And, you know, if Nurmagomedov does what Nurmagomedov does, what does that say about him? He'd be an absolutely fantastic fighter if he takes out Dustin Poirier in dominant fashion like he's taking out everyone else.
As for Max Holloway, does he go back to the featherweight division, Joe? He's had some trouble making the weight recently. Dana White wants him to go back. I think he does. He has not wavered from that opinion. 100%.
I have no ifs, ands, or buts. I think this was a bit of a wake-up call for him. Not that he said, I'm sure he believes he can beat Dustin Poirier, and I'm sure he believes that he can beat anybody at 155, but you're the champ at 145. Go and defend that title until something happens. If you continue to do it, just add to your legacy at 145 to be the best featherweight of all time. And then when the time comes to move up, because you've completely cleaned out that division, go to 155 and then take it from there.
Now, James, here's the issue. What if Aldo beats Volkanovski?
Edgar fights him.
Edgar. Okay.
Yeah, they do it. I know there's no steam there, but that is a chip they have. I think that's why you haven't seen Edgar booked against anyone. I think Ali, as manager, knows that, you know, there is that potential on the table, especially with, you know, and Ali will use this as leverage, saying, look, Edgar bailed you out when Holloway was injured, that one fight, and Ortega had to fight Edgar, and Edgar got knocked out. I mean, that was a favor he did. So I think they're waiting for that, and then that will happen. But yeah, I have zero interest. As good as Aldo's been, even if Aldo goes out there and knocks out Volkanovski, I have zero interest in the trilogy, because it's not like Holloway beat him in a close decision. He finished him both times. We don't need to see the trilogy, in my opinion, as good as Aldo's been.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind an Edgar fight. I would love to see him fight, because this weekend it'll mark a year since he's actually fought. But yeah, I could definitely see that happening. And I did see Israel Adesanya defeat Kelvin Gastelum, really poured it on in the last round. And when I looked at this, I was like, man, Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whittaker were each other's better matchup. I don't know if Adesanya is a great matchup for a kind of small for the division Robert Whittaker, something that has benefited him in the past. You know what Adesanya is going to do. He's not going to wrestle Robert Whittaker. He did not wrestle Kelvin Gastelum, but he did show off like at least a threatening submission game that got him got him into a bad situation and got him out of the same bad situation. Joe, what surprised you the most about Adesanya's performance? He lived up to the hype.
Living up to the hype. I mean, we've all said it from day one with this guy. Like, he gets it. Just watch every single James Lynch interview with him. Listen to how he speaks. Listen to how he breaks things down. Listen to how he dissects fighting. He's an absolute treat to watch. I thought, if anything, he was a bit more lenient in terms of his attacks, not able to pull that trigger, but he was patient, and you got to be patient in 5 rounds. So he was very patient and really turned it on when the opportunity presented itself in the 5th round. The championship rounds 4 and 5. That 5th round, as soon as he was able to hurt Gastelum, he then went in there for the finish and almost got that finish. So super impressed with Israel's performance, and I think he's going to do absolutely fantastic. What's even more, well, I shouldn't say what's more impressive, but what really impressed me was Robert Whittaker's tweet eventually a day or so later, when he basically said, "You've been exposed, son. Get ready." Those are fighting words, boys.
I personally think that Adesanya matches up pretty well with Whittaker, depending on how well Whittaker can implement a wrestling game. Although we have seen now, James, people can get inside on Adesanya despite that reach, despite that 6'4" frame. What did this fight say to you? What did you think of it? And how do things look in the future for Whittaker versus Adesanya?
There's a lot of things to take away from this. First off, Calvin Gastelum had this fight in the bag in the 4th round. If he just would have kept it standing instead of going for that takedown,
yeah.
I believe. I mean, I know I'm a guy behind a computer here, but still, I thought there was a missed opportunity there. So Calvin will probably
need a term for that. Need a term for rocking somebody and then going up for the cage grapple.
Yeah. We'll figure that out at some point. But I think Israel's stock actually went up. I mean, people disagree with me. Again, I talked about people calling Holloway overrated. I saw the same thing with Israel. Oh, he never had to fight Yoel Romero, or I had these people saying that like, if he fought Rockhold or Weidman, it would be different. It's like, give this guy some credit for God's sakes. Like, it's a good thing that he's progressing well. He's entertaining. He's he can sell himself very well, like Joe mentioned in the interviews. Like, people should root for this guy. And for whatever reason, you have the people who think the opposite and they would rather see him lose. I don't get that. But the reason I say his stock went up is because he took a lot of shots and was still able to persevere and get the win. To me, it shows he's battle tested. That was the one thing. I mean, people look at his fights and they're like, yeah, but it's Derek Brunson. He's gotten finished before. It's like, yeah, well, he's still finishing these guys. Like, it's impressive. We got to look at things like that. So I thought it was good. I love the trash talk with Whittaker after. Here's one thing we haven't talked about with Robert Whittaker. He's barely fought. He's taken a lot of damage in those fights with Yoel Romero. I mean, if you look at the two, I'd have to go back and look at Israel's, kickboxing career. I know he's been knocked out in kickboxing, but I would wager that Robert Whittaker's had a lot more wear and tear than Israel has, and that could play to his disadvantage in this fight. And Israel, again, styles make fights. I think that this is one of those fights where I think Izzy's style could be a little bit different. Has Whittaker faced the type of striker like Israel Adesanya before? It's tough to say. So I'm really excited for that fight. Hopefully it comes to fruition, this year. You never know with Whittaker's injuries. We're hearing things, this and that. And for Calvin Gastelum, I mean, you were an inch away from winning that title. He's still in the mix. I think he should fight Yoel Romero next. And then that way you have this sort of, again, tournament, so to speak, where if either one of those guys wins, you put them in the driver's seat. Now, hopefully, it wouldn't be Whittaker and Romero, and then you're not going to get that trilogy fight. But still, you could have a possibility of a fresh matchup, by doing that, in my opinion.
Speaking of Adesanya and his marketability, 5 performance bonuses in 14 months. The only person that he didn't get one against is against Marvin Vettori. Speaking of, where's he? Because if he's not saying, get me back in the cage right now after going to a split with Israel Adesanya, I don't know what he's doing. It's been a year since he's fought. I don't think he's even had anything scheduled since the Adesanya split.
Sean, you got a short memory, man. Fightful, go check on our site. We interviewed Vettori's under suspension by USADA.
Oh, you're right.
Come on, man.
Right, Sean.
I thought you watched all my interviews. What's going on here?
I do. I know
there's so many. I know they get lost in the shuffle, but it was a USADA thing here. So that's why he's waiting for that. So,
oh my God. Yeah, he's not fought since then. It makes him look a little bit better because everybody else has had Adesanya has had these highlight reel performances against them. Not him, but I'm ready for Adesanya Whittaker in the summer. And hopefully in the summer, we'll see how that
What's the latest with Whittaker's injuries or since the surgery? Is he healed up?
I think he said like August, didn't he?
Man,
roughly.
We're in April. Damn it! All right.
Meanwhile, Habib is saying September for Dustin Poirier, which means at least December. At least December.
No, I think September's fine. I mean, Ramadan ends
Abu Dhabi, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't Ramadan end beginning of September? I mean, I'm completely wrong.
No, Ramadan starts beginning of May this year and runs through the beginning of June.
Oh, plenty of time for a training camp then after that.
Yeah, so probably December.
Oh, Jesus. Come on.
Another fight worth mentioning, Khalil Rountree put the pain on Eric Anders. Now, I am a Khalil Rountree believer now. This is the prospect everybody was talking about a few years ago, before the inconsistency. And he's looked good. He ran into Johnny Walker once, but that's okay. Sometimes Johnny Walker will put you down. Joe, what did this performance, this absolute drubbing of Anders say to you? And should the corner have stopped it in between the second and third round?
I flat out was watching this fight thinking to myself, I cannot wait till my basement to be completed here so I get my gym back, because I have a banana bag in my home gym downstairs that I haven't been able to use in about a year and a half, courtesy of some of the stuff that I get from Joseph Valtellini, if you guys know who Bazooka Joe is. Yeah, so he gave me a smashing awesome training regimen that ends every single, it's a 10-round cardio training, and it all ends with low leg kicks. And what Khalil Rountree was doing with those low leg kicks were just absolutely magical. I actually, for once in a while, I agreed with the commentators on the show, just showing you the difference of when you go potentially to Thailand to learn the training and learn the understanding. And what Khalil did to Eric Anders was something else. But we have to give credit to Eric Anders. Come on, man. That guy there took an absolute beating for 15 minutes and would not go away. That's the true heart of a warrior. And calling him a savage on the broadcast was absolutely correct. He is a savage for not going away, because in MMA, anything can happen. And Eric Anders could have landed a perfect shot. You never know. But Khalil was very cerebral in that performance, stuck to his game plan, did a fantastic job.
James, your thoughts?
Best performance of his career. We hope this is a sign of things to come, because he's been Mr. Inconsistency, you know, win-loss, win-loss. He'll have like a really good win, really bad loss. I think part of that is due to his camp. If you remember, he was at Syndicate. Things didn't really work out from there. Then his last fight against Johnny Walker, I believe he was back home in California. Now he's training in Thailand, and I don't know if you saw any of the pre-fight stuff. Actually tried to get an interview with him, no dice because of the time change and everything. But he loves Thailand. He like wants to live there now, and I think that is like unleashed his like best qualities, which is his striking, and he's really sort of honed in on that. And I don't think Eric Anders expected that version of Khalil by any means, because that was a complete beatdown. You could have, if you were Anders' corner, you could have thrown in that fight, I thought, at a certain point, because it was just getting pretty brutal. And yeah, certainly back on the horse. And I think this was the guy we all thought we were going to see at some point from the Ultimate Fighter. Now we got to see it on Saturday. So I hope it continues. I hope this is just isn't like one good performance. I hope he continues this run in the 205-pound division.
Nikita Krylov won a fight, guys.
Oh man, was I ever wrong on that one? Jeez,
that fight
we all were.
sucked. I mean, I'm not talking from an excitement standpoint. That was fine. I can't believe these are two allegedly top 15 light heavyweights. Nikita Krylov fan was in attendance at this fight and got a fist bump, an honest-to-God fist bump from Nikita Krylov. And he goes, that's why he won. And I said, you know what? I can't discount that. I can't discount that.
You see, when you sent me that tweet, Sean, I didn't know he was there live.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 2 days before it was decided.
Attaboy. So, good for him.
I predicted an OSP Von Flue choke. It almost happened, Joe.
Yeah, I know. But listen,
Krylov was begging to be Von Flued.
Yeah, well, listen, it could have been all part of his game plan, because, come on, you can't tell me that his striking didn't look good in this fight.
Okay, his body kicks looked good. I thought some of his punches at range looked good, but then there were some where he would throw his back foot up off the ground, and I thought those were bad. I think the most comical thing you have ever said on this podcast is implying that Nikita Krylov had anything resembling a game plan. That is hilarious.
I see your point there. I mean, in looking at the fight, watching the fight, and he got mount, right? He got mount and eventually gets the rear naked choke. I was like, what am I watching here? Like, who is this OSP? Like, what happened? What's going on here?
I think York FC is going to have you do some stand-up comedy over the PA after their games. James, any thoughts on this one? When I look at this, I'm thinking Khalil Rountree, Nikita Krylov. Give me that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it also speaks to OSP and just the fact that he just hasn't evolved, really. I mean, this is a bad loss for him. I think you should do that original fight they were talking about between him and Misha Serkinov, a loser leaves town match type thing, because it's just both of those guys really have to get it together here. I think we're really seeing the downfall. But for Krylov, we'll see. I'm still not sold on this guy. I know he's 26, and I know this is a good win for him, but I need to see more. And I think if you can get past Khalil Rountree, then you certainly proved your worth. But I still think the verdict's out on him a little bit.
I always go back to the John Jones interview with Joe Rogan, and he's very good at analyzing and breaking down fights. And Joe Rogan was like, you seem to have trouble with OSP. And he was like, well, the thing is, he's had like 40 fights, but he's so raw that he doesn't have tendencies. Like, even though he's 35, 40 fights into the game, great fighters have a lot of tendencies for better or for worse. And I don't think that he knows what he's going to do next. So sometimes that bites him.
Guys, I'd rather see Khalil Rountree. I know I'm jumping rankings here, but first of all, he's not even the top 15 according to the rankings on the site. Krylov's at 15, but I would rather see Khalil Rountree eventually fight Jimmy Manuwa. That's the fight I want to see, or Ilir Latifi. That's what I want to see.
I like that Jimmy Manuwa fight as well. I would like that. Speaking of loser leave town matches, it looks like Wilson Hayes is probably Asia bound after he got starched by Pantoja. Also, this is them paring away the flyweight division. Any thoughts on this, James?
Yeah, I was completely wrong on this one too. Pantoja definitely took care of business. Hayes, when you start getting knocked out like this, it's concerning. Could be the beginning of the end for him. He's got a lot of fights, a lot of wear and tear. It's unfortunate. Super nice guy, but yeah, this is a sign of things I think to come. That it might be time for him to hang him up.
Joe, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I didn't think Pantoja was going to be able to do it. I agreed with James there. I thought Wilson was going to be able to pull this off, but man, am I impressed with Alexandre. That guy there has got some power, some speed, and it's not just the speed and the accuracy, it's the ability to explode upon reaction. Lands the punches and switches gears and goes in for the finish. I mean, very, very impressive, and people need to start talking about him now because I know what James is saying, that when you get to a certain age in MMA, you got MMA mileage, and you start getting dropped by punches you used to basically walk through, that is very concerning for Hayes. But at the same time, Pantoja doing that, we should be paying more attention to this kid in terms of what he could be doing, even though I know it's at 125 and he's making a case to keep the division around, but man, kid's got talent.
Speaking of the prelims, Matt Frivola beat Jalen Turner, Max Griffin over Amadaev, Khalid Taha smoked Boston Salmon, you're welcome. Montel Jackson, who James just interviewed, defeated Andre Stukumtoth. Polyana Botelho defeated Lauren Mueller. That was a miserable fight. Brandon Davis submitted Randy Costa. And Bilal Muhammad defeated Curtis Melender. Besides my little salmon joke, I don't think Bilal Muhammad did himself any favors getting off a fight pass, but hey, he's making that cool $70K. I posted on Twitter that I thought Bilal Muhammad is exactly the kind of fighter that UFC would lowball in negotiations and be like, try it out in Bellator. Then he personally reminded me that Ali Abdelaziz is his manager, as James often does in those situations. James, any thoughts on these remaining prelim fights?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Did you see the payout for Israel and Kelvin? Kelvin got really underpaid.
Yeah, well, everybody got really underpaid.
Well, no, but Kelvin. But think about it though. Think of who's been in the UFC longer. Israel's been in the UFC for about over a year now. He got $350K flat, win or loss, wouldn't have mattered. Kelvin only got $150. There's something wrong with that. Think about that.
Yeah. I would agree.
And Ali is his manager, so I don't know if that's him trying to do a favor for them or what. I don't know what it is, but that's not good.
That's something we've heard, that sometimes Ali will get them the big fights and maybe not as much money.
Like Cejudo, when he fought Demetrius, same thing. It was a low. So that's something to keep an eye on as well, because that really jumped out to me, because that's a huge discrepancy. If anything, it should be the other way around, I would think, just because of how long Kelvin's been in the UFC.
Joe, you were saying?
Yeah, sometimes when I look at these numbers and I think to myself, man, that's low, that's bad, that's this, it's that. Bottom line is, fighter signs a contract, right? So you know what you're going to be getting paid heading into that fight. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have to discuss it. It is low, in my opinion, for Kelvin to be competing for a title, and for as long as he's been in the UFC, I do agree. But whoever's scoring those deals for Israel, doing a pretty damn good job, because if I'm Israel, I'm signing on that dotted line as well, because think of the extra $200K that he made in that win. Even though there's no win bonus, his manager may have structured it in a way where it's like, we don't want a win bonus anymore. Give us a flat. And say to yourself, okay, is this worth it? And part of it is, look at what Conor McGregor had stated to Eddie Alvarez and his management when they fought. He started mocking him at the press conference, saying this idiot is still competing at what his contract says and didn't renegotiate more money to be fighting against me. Think about that.
Well, this weekend it's UFC St. Petersburg. It starts early. I'm going to isolate this as I do all other previews and post it, which will probably then be retitled Sean Ross Sapp struggles to name any of these people. This is going to be real sad, my attempts. Also, an attempt of me knowing virtually anything about two people in a single fight on this show. That'll be a struggle outside of a couple fights. When you look at this show, James, and you look at some of the names on here, it's very clear they're catering this towards the market that they're going to be in. There are some names, the Roxanne Modafferi's, the Antonina Shevchenko. I mean, she's got some name value because of who she's related to. Overeem. Some people know Alexei Oleinik. Tybura might jump off the page a little. Well, what do you see in this card?
It's just a showcase of the up-and-coming European talent, I think, especially the Russians as well. It's not a solid card, I think, and this is just coming from someone who doesn't know that scene very well. I've heard from other people that it is a strong card from that perspective, but as far as name value goes, yeah, it's pretty one of the weaker cards for the UFC, but that's okay. I mean, again, when you do as many events as UFC does, we've talked about this, I don't know how many times, you're going to get cards like this where they're going to focus more on the prospects and up-and-comers, and there'll be people who are dedicated and can't wait to see this card. I'm not one of them. This is not. I know you always joke about, is this a Saturday, Sunday afternoon, post-fight show or what? Like this definitely is. Maybe even a Tuesday post-fight show as well. But yeah, it's not a strong card, but I think that's the point. They want to. I mean, Islam Makhachev's in the co-main event, which I find interesting because he's a guy that I've heard from everyone in American Kickboxing Academy is like the future. So he has a chance to put it together. This is just more a showcase for the up-and-coming talent. It's not a strong card.
Yeah, if this were not a show that ended at like 4 p.m. in the afternoon, this would be a Saturday or Sunday or Tuesday post show. Let's go ahead and get into it. Alex Da Silva, I'm just going to run through some of these lines. We'll talk about the fights that stand out because there aren't a lot. Alex Da Silva plus 135, Yakovlev a minus 155. You have Antigulov at plus 175 taking on Alexachek a minus 210. Mustafayev a minus 175 against Fiziev a plus 155. Keita Nakamura and Sultan Aliyev are a pick'em at minus 110 each. You have Singwoo Choi a plus 235 against Evlaev a minus 275. And then you have Marcin Tybura a minus 155 and Abdurakhimov a plus 135. Devin Clark a plus 165. Shit Kryov? What? A minus 190.
That's terrible.
Sergey Pavlovich, a minus 270. Marcelo Golm, a plus 230. You have Tesserkayan, a plus 320 against Makhachev, a minus 390. There are a lot of pretty sizable lines on this show, Joe, but are there any of these fighters that you're looking at and saying, can't wait to see them in there? Because I'm sure that despite my complete uneducation about this M1 global card with a UFC sticker slapped on it, that there are some good fighters on this show.
There are some good fights on this card, actually. I mean, if you take a look at some of the people that are competing, I mean, Fiziev at plus 155, that's value right there, even though it's Mustafayev that he's competing against. I think that's a good fight. Islam Makhachev at minus 390. Whoo, that's pretty big if you guys ask me. But some of these fights, I mean, you take a look at Modafferi versus Shevchenko. I believe that line is perfectly fine. James, I'm not sure if you agree. And Sean, pardon my analogy here, because James will definitely understand this. Sean, maybe you will as well. But James, this reminds me of taking a few NHL players, bringing them to the KHL, and just showcasing some NHL talent versus all the KHL talent.
Yeah. Great analogy. That's pretty much how I look at this card too. Yeah.
So how many people are going to want to watch this, really, right? So I get it, and we'll see what happens. But the whole point is eventually to build some names off of this. But people need to view these fights to get those names to begin building. So,
I hope somebody goes viral on this show, basically.
Exactly.
Somebody you can throw up in a tweet, and ESPN's going to pick up whatever the hell they want, but they hope that it is a Mikel Pereira situation where he's doing lion salts off the cage and such. That way you can build it for the next go around, I guess. I see this almost as a loss leader type of card, James. There aren't a lot of people on this show I'm particularly looking forward to. Even Marcin Tybura, he beat Stefan Struve, but I can't remember the last time I watched Marcin Tybura and thought, damn, that was good. Like maybe 2017. It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say quickly. Yeah, I just wanted to add that I agree with Joe here. I think the goal here is to find like a highlight reel clip, and then they can use it later on. But a lot of these matchups, like if you look at, if you look at this a little bit closer, like the Antonina and Roxanne fight's a prime example. Like, I would pick Antonina in that fight. I think she clearly has an edge in the stand-up. And Roxanne, I think there's a ceiling with her. As great as her story's been with this comeback and her being on the Ultimate Fighter and making it to the finals and everything, I think there is a ceiling, and I think Antonina is going to exploit that. And I think they want to build her up a little bit more. And I think, with Devin Clark and Shrikov undefeated, Clark, been a little up and down in the UFC. Again, they want to build him up. Pavlovich is an Ali guy as well, who had that really disappointing debut against Overeem. I think they want to get him a win here too. Marcelo Gomes has been disappointing. Like, a lot of this is just designed to, again, prop these guys up. And then when they bring them over to North America, they got the highlight package. So I just wanted to mention that.
Sorry, Sean, before you go, I want to ask you both the real question, because it was James and we were talking about before with Modafferi, and Shevchenko. What is going to be both of your reactions if Modafferi gets her down to the ground and controls her early in a round? Think about that for a second. That could be a crazy fight right there.
That could be. And Shevchenko is a massive favorite at plus or minus 350. Modafferi a plus 290. And I've always said this, women's fights are sort of like heavyweight fights to me. There's an element of unpredictability in that, because that aspect of the sport is so young. And it's like I've said before, Modafferi, although I don't know how valuable some of that massive experience advantage that she has is, she does have a massive MMA experience advantage. That could play a role. I think it's maybe worth putting 5 on. I don't know, but I think Shevchenko is probably going to smoke her in this one. We also have Krzysztof Jotko in action. That's a name that we know to be at least a quality name to some degree. He's a minus 190 favorite over Edmundovsky at a plus 165. We mentioned Makhachev earlier. He's a good fighter, minus 390. So there are a few fighters on this show that I'm like, okay, interesting. But I'm with you guys. This is a Strikeforce Challengers card, so to speak.
Yeah,
that's how I view that. And there's nothing wrong with a Strikeforce Challengers card, especially when it starts at 10 a.m. Eastern. I'm stoked for that. Let's go ahead and talk about the main event. Alexei Oleinik, a plus 205. Alistair Overeem, a minus 245. This is a good fight. This is just a good fight, man. Alistair Overeem can't put together 3 wins in a row over the past couple of years. He did beat Pavlovich. He's fighting all over the place these days. He went to China. He's fighting in Russia now. I don't see him falling victim to some of Oleinik's tricks, so to speak. It is not easy. Like, a lot of people look at Alistair Overeem and they think of the complete monster trucks he has on the end of his gloves. But the guy just, quite frankly, does not get submitted these days. He doesn't. Much less by some of the stuff that Oleinik pulls out, the Ezekiel choke that he specializes in. That being said, the people that he submits with Ezekiel chokes don't typically tap out to Ezekiel chokes. It's like not something that happens. He's able to pull off like scarf holds and stuff that are traditionally positional in MMA.
And you're not supposed to do.
That you're not supposed to do. That are stuff that you get people with like the first or second time they come to a jiu-jitsu class.
That's so true.
And he's getting high-level professional fighters with this stuff, Joe. So it's Alistair Overeem, guy who just does not get tapped out, against Alexei Oleinik, guy who taps people out with stuff that shouldn't tap people out.
And that's why it's a beautiful matchup. It's a great matchup. But I will say 4 words and 4 words only, considering who I think is going to win this fight. I'll let you guys figure out who that's going to be. 4 words. There will be knees. Knees to the body. Overeem is just going to crush that body if Oleinik dares to clinch with him. And I think Overeem's knees are going to shock and awe Oleinik, and I think he's able to pull off this victory.
James, how do you feel about this one?
This is how I feel. I think Overeem wins. I like the fact that he's been at Elevation training with Curtis Blades and kind of been off the radar a little bit. You know, you haven't heard much from him. He's not really active on social media as much as he used to be. He's kind of literally doing like a Rocky camp these days, just kind of minding his own business and doing that. I think that's a very dangerous thing, even at 38 years of age. But and I don't mean any disrespect to the person I'm about to speak about right now, but basically Oleinik went from the basement to the penthouse, going from Walt Harris to Overeem. I mean, let's be honest, that was a fight that shouldn't have happened at UFC Ottawa with Oleinik fighting Walt Harris. I think he has, you know, got some quality wins that are clearly higher than that. Now he's got this big opportunity against Overeem. I know he's 41. I know he shouldn't, you know, submit the guys that he's submitting, but he does. That's a very dangerous thing here. Like I've said before on the show, I think this is one of those classic situations where I think Overeem wins, but I do think the value here is on Oleinik because there is that what if factor. This is a guy who, you know, realistically should have not be on the winning streak he's on, should not be beating the guys he's beating. Even the Curtis Blades fight, a lot of people forget that was a little bit controversial with how that ended. So, and he trains at a great camp. And let's not forget either that Oleinik has fought, or trains, I should say, with a couple of the training partners that have fought Overeem and Junior Dos Santos and Andrei Arlovsky. So that's an advantage as well. So we'll see. I think Oleinik could potentially surprise here, but more likely than not, Overeem, like Joe said, with the knees and everything, gets it done. But don't underestimate Oleinik, even at his age. I think he's a guy that could pull this off.
Oleinik first fought, like I got to say with these people, that we know of in November 1996. By the end of that night, he was 3-0 as a pro fighter. That is just unbelievable. Like that, I think that he fought a grand total of 7-8 nights throughout the first 10 years of his career. But across those 7 or 8 nights, he had 18 or 19 fights. That's unbelievable. That's wild. He was a journeyman, a successful journeyman. And then when he tapped out Mirko Cro Cop to that scarf hold, UFC's like, all right, let's bring this guy in. And he's just kept doing it. He's had performance of the nights along the way. It's very special. But, man, Overeem, and a few years ago, I would have thought that if Overeem saw some of the troubles that he's had, I thought that maybe he would just call it a day or do something else. He's stuck with it. He's always going to be a name that if he wins 2 or 3 fights in a row and you need somebody for a UFC heavyweight title fight, he'll be there. I think he's going to end up picking up this win. But this is a good main event fight. We also have Rizin coming up this weekend. Showdown Joe, you're going to be there. There are some Tenshin Nasukawa in action, kickboxing action just after he fought last month. And you got Kyoji Horiguchi in action against Ben Nguyen. King Mo is there. What are you looking forward to on this show, Joe?
Just to see Tenshin's reaction in front of the Rizin crowd for sure, considering what happened with the Mayweather fight, getting knocked out the way he did in the first round. Anything Horiguchi is going to be fantastic, and Ben Nguyen's going to bring him some problems, but Horiguchi's just at another level. I think and hope people will be talking about the Prochazka and King Mo fight. It is the main event. Now remember, King Mo and Yuri Prochazka are the main event. I stress that again. They are the main event with Nasukawa and Horiguchi on a Rizin card. So think about what Rizin is trying to do with this main event here. They're really trying to build, the winner of this fight. I'm sure they're probably leaning towards Prochazka, even if it's King Mo. King Mo's got a good following in Japan, but Prochazka is a guy that they've been building for quite some time in hopes to get that Mirko Cro Cop fight and lure Cro Cop back. It's not going to happen anymore, obviously, with what happened with Mirko. But Prochazka is going to be giving people a lot of headaches. First, he's got to deal with King Mo. There's been some other fights here that I'm really looking forward to. The return of Reina to see how her mind is going with. She's taking on Samantha Jean-Francois, who shocked a lot of people at the last card. So there's going to be some slick fights here. The worst news possible for this fight card happened about a week or two ago, and they just released it, I believe, this morning, Sean, if I'm not mistaken, was the fact that there's been an injury. Asakura is no longer competing. His opponent got injured. I'm drawing a blank here as to who it was. He fought in the UFC.
Sasaki, right?
Scoggins.
Oh, Scoggins.
Yeah,
you're right.
Scoggins' knee just completely blew, and that was going to be potentially for a title fight. So, or at least that's what Scoggins wanted. But the rest of this card is just ridiculously stupid. It's going to be fast. It's going to be explosive, and I literally can't wait to get there and start calling this fight. It's going to be a crappy long flight, James, as you kind of know sometimes. But yeah, it's going to be fun.
I love how active Horiguchi has been since coming over to Rizin. I think he's got like 9. This weekend will be like 9 or 10 fights in 2 years. It's outstanding. James, anything you're particularly looking forward to on this show?
Yeah, and Joe knows this as well. I'm a big Shinju Auclair fan. She's going to come back, see how she responds after her first career loss. In the last fight, she trains Gilbert Melendez's gym out there, so hopefully she can get back on the winning track. I think she's someone they can definitely market. Great personality, very young. I think there's a lot of talent there, and she's actually pretty big for the division too, so that's kind of interesting. And how about Damian Brown coming off that big win over Gary Cruikshank, looking to build off that? I think he's a guy, I know he had some losses in the UFC, but he's so entertaining. You never have a bad fight with this guy, so I'm excited to see if he can continue his winning ways as well. Those are ones. And Manuel Cape is always a joy to watch too.
He's nuts. He's an absolute mess, that kid. So yeah, that's going to be fun. If for everyone on the chat or everyone tuning in right now, if you like your kickboxing, you like your striking, Taiga's the opening fight of the evening. So I don't think that one's going to go 3 rounds, but yeah, look for someone's jaw to fall on the mat. So
as we wrap up the show, I want to ask you guys, give me a percentage of percentage chance. Do we ever see John Jones versus Israel Adesanya? Showdown Joe.
Percentage chance that those two will, I'll go 55%.
Yes, 55% yes?
Yeah.
How about you, James?
I'll, just like Joe did last week with me, Price is Right style, go 54%. I think that here's the thing, because like it would like Israel's not like a big middleweight, and Jones is yeah, and like if anything, he could almost make, well, I don't think he could make 170, but that's still like he's an undersized middleweight. And then you have Jones, who's probably like almost filling into like a heavyweight frame these days. So I don't know how much longer he even wants to stay at 205. So we'll see. I mean, I don't really have a desire to see this fight right now, just because I think Jones is a lot further ahead. And I think, there'd be a lot of disadvantages for Israel in that fight, especially on the ground. So yeah, it was a nice sort of thing that they threw out there, but I don't really want to see that fight, to be honest.
Yeah. Both guys 6'4", but considering their frames, Israel Adesanya is only 2 years younger. It's not like he's going to fill in to his frame the same way that John Jones has. Also, a big reason I don't want to see this anywhere near right now, Israel Adesanya is a blue belt. And while he did some impressive things against Kelvin Gastelum, I don't need to see that yet. And he's aware of that. He knows that. He said as much this week. Guys, make sure you all leave a thumbs up on this video. It really helps people find us. We are on podcast platforms all over the place. So check us out. Let people know about us. Our MMA side still growing all the time. So you all subscribing, leaving thumbs up on all that stuff, checking out interviews. It is of a great service. James Lynch has a new one up there with Montel Jackson right now. James, what else you have going on this week?
Trying to get another couple interviews for Fightful this week. Yeah, just kind of decompressing. It was a really busy weekend for myself because I had a race, trail race here in BC that I had to do. It was like 8.4K. Did that in the morning with my wife, and then had to go call the fights that night, and then had to watch UFC 236 and everything else. So this week's kind of like, it's like Easter and everything. So just gonna kind of decompress a little bit. I'll check out this card and everything else, and just get back to action.
How about yourself, Joe? You doing anything this weekend?
Doing this today first there, boys. 3 o'clock's coming up, 6 minutes to go. Juventus, Ajax Champions League this weekend, obviously in Japan. Got my coaching, my soccer, but we'll have some fun in Japan. I'll try and send some pics over to you guys and some videos if possible, if they allow me to do it, because sometimes it's very difficult to get videos there because they've already done all the interviews with the fighters sometimes by the time I get there. So everyone follow my social media at Showdown Joe. I'll do my very best to post some stuff specifically on Instagram and on my stories. But other than that, I'm very excited for the next 6 minutes to get in front of my television, watch some soccer, coach some soccer tonight and tomorrow, and then head on out to Japan.
Follow us on our social media. Joe is at Showdown Joe. James is at Lynch on Sports. I am at Sean Ross Sapp. We also have Fightful MMA, Fightful Wrestle. Check them out. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Till next time, guys, we're out.